All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's episode of Amplifying the Arts. I'm Ashley Lucier, the Executive Director of Amp Up Arts, and I'm so glad that everyone is joining us today. If this is your first time, Amplifying the Arts is part of our monthly series where we highlight art educators and teaching artists who are shaping the future of arts education in Alabama. So these sessions specifically are designed to share stories and strategies and inspiration from those working directly with students. So today I'm excited to introduce Ruth O'Connor, a dedicated visual arts educator, practicing artist, and arts integration specialist. So Ruth is known for creating really rigorous, engaging lessons that connect arts and non-art subjects. She also maintains her own studio practice and supports underrepresented artists through an annual nonprofit event every year. So Ruth, we're really glad to have you here. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to that introduction?
No, thank you. That was a very thorough introduction. Thank you, Ashley, and thanks for inviting me to be here. I think that I get used to sometimes living in a small town like Tuscaloosa, but it's nice to share some of the work that we've been doing here and that I've been doing in the state with a larger audience. So I appreciate the invitation to share.
I'm super excited. I'll just let everyone know, I actually saw Ruth teaching last week, right? Was it last week? My schedule, it's hard to keep up, but it was really great. It was really great to see you in the classroom and in your element. And we'll probably talk about some of that in a little bit. So let's dive in. So first of all, kind of just your journey of becoming a visual arts educator and a practicing artist. What did that look like for you? Was it something that started when you were young, came naturally? Kind of what's that story?
Yeah, so I'll be really brief with it because it's an easy story. I was a creative kid, and my mother definitely fostered me doodling and being creative, and took me to the galleries on the Fridays, and I was raised in Miami, and so there's a pretty active arts scene in Miami, Florida. But as far as becoming an arts educator and a practicing artist, I went to school. And it's when I tell this to young students or young aspiring artists, sometimes it's a shock to them that art school is an option. And it's like, well, yeah, like if you're going to be a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher, or, there's schools that prepare you for these careers. And so if you're serious about your arts, whatever your field is, there's plenty of schools out there that will help you in that journey. And so I jumped around a little bit, went to a community college, and wasn't sure that I wanted to be an artist full time. I wanted to I was leaning a little bit more towards education. And so I started to major in education, and then had a few internships, and it wasn't exactly what I thought it would be. I wasn't interested. It was a lot of grading papers and babysitting, it felt like. And so I asked my professor to reassign me. And in that reassigning of my internship, I came across a portfolio day for art school and found out that you can study the arts and education. And so I transferred up to Maryland Institute College of Art, where I was able to get my undergraduate degree in the visual arts so I can focus on the arts, and then my master's degree in education, the arts education. And they have a really strong program, one of the strongest in the nation there. So I was lucky to just by chance find it and be accepted into it. But yeah, it was a pretty straight shot after that. It really prepared me really well for the following years and till this day. Yeah.
It is really interesting it's great for the students to be able to hear that, like about you getting an education in the arts at a higher, level, collegiate level. Because they don't hear about it that much, and there's not a lot of programs in Alabama. So I think that's part of it too, is that they just don't know, a lot of it exists. So that's always really good that they can see those different career pathways. And, you kind of just talked a little bit about teaching and kind of what you thought teaching would be and, what it ended up being. But I think also too, a strength of a lot of art educators is that studio practice that they have. Like when I taught English, I didn't really have I wasn't an author, before I taught English. So it's a little different, that kind of personal practice that you have and the depth that you can go into it with arts. And so I wanted to kind of ask, how has that practice shaped the way that you approach teaching? Because you've kind of seen both sides of it now.
Yes. So I think keeping a really steady and active studio practice has helped my teaching in a lot of ways, and it affects not only my teaching, but I think it also affects the student work and the student experience. I'm very focused on process. I'm not very focused on product. And to me, that was something that was taught during my master's studies, that there's a difference between when you focus on process versus product in the art classroom. But when you have that experience in the studio, when you find the value of going through maybe a painting that's a failure and you actually go through all the motions, you're a little bit more prepared to help students and guide students in the classroom when they're feeling like they're failing at this project or failing at this thing or not getting the results that they want or that they're trying for. So I think it keeps me compassionate, it keeps me well grounded, to be able to be there for my students. And I tell them up front all the time, like, this one, don't worry about it. It's okay if it looks bad. In fact, we might throw it in the trash. This is just an experience. I just want you to try this type of drawing, or I want you to try this type of movement, whatever. It's very low, hopefully low pressure in my classroom. And I think we saw that last week when you observed me, that I tell the kids a lot, oh, it's okay, we're just gonna do this and then it's gonna go, it's just, we keep going.
Yeah.
It's a lot through the process. And so I think, there's a lot more that I can say about it, but I think that's the one that jumps out the strongest for me.
I think that's where the kids learn most of their skills too. We were kind of talking about that in last month's webinar. We were talking about advocacy, really, but we were talking about it in terms of especially the public, and trying to get people to understand what arts education is a lot of times as they see the gallery show at the end, they see the play at the end, the Christmas play or the dance performance at the end of the school year, and they don't see the process and those skills and that resilience that's really the really important part of what the students are doing.
I agree.
And I think that that's great for the students too, because you think about how many of them, when they start, I thought about that, as an English teacher, it was always in their mind, if they couldn't make this perfect writing assignment right away, that perfect product, it was difficult for them to want to even start or to try, until you got them comfortable with that. So I think that that's great to really focus on that process. Was there kind of I know you said this was a natural kind of course for you, but was there something that, maybe a student experience or kind of a pivotal moment where you were yes, I definitely, especially when you switched over, this is the day, I decided I want to be, on this path to be an arts educator?
Yeah, it took me a while to be convinced, but I think I felt pretty natural in both environments, as an artist and as an educator. I wasn't sure that I was making an impact on my students. In the first year, I felt underprepared. I felt discipline was very challenging for me. How do I fully engage students? How do I keep them on task? How do I challenge the ones that need it? And the first year was really challenging. But I remember it was after my first year, and I was in Maryland, and I was in a mall, and I was walking, and one of my old students, who was a really, really, really tall, slender young man, saw me. And they used to call me Miss J, because my maiden last name starts with a J, and it was difficult to pronounce. And so they would just call me Miss J. And from across the store, I was walking, and he was like in a store, and he says like, Miss J. And so he comes up to talk to me, and I am shocked, because this is one of the kids who was always in trouble. He was always not engaged. He was, I mean, across the board, I was like, this kid has no respect for me, does not care about school, like totally disengaged. I was like, forget it.
Too cool for arts. Yeah.
All the things. And he stood me there for a solid like 5 to 6 minutes, telling me how much the class meant to him, about how I was so patient and positive with him, and how much it meant to him, that he was going through so much at home. He was going through much with drug addiction. There was all these things going on in his life. And he's like, you always tried to keep me on task, and you showed me compassion. Like, he told me all the things that I was trying to do, but I didn't think I was being good at it. And I didn't see the evidence of it. Like, I wanted to see the results of it, and I didn't see that. And it was just by chance walking in the mall that he shared that with me. But I always remember that now, because that was, 20 years ago. But I always remember it now because I'm the same age. But I remember now, because it's like, you don't know the impact you're having on the people that you're coming across. And just because you're not seeing the results right away, that doesn't mean that it's not there. Especially kids. That was a high school class, and it was, I mean, we all know middle school, high school, there's different challenges.
Sometimes they don't realize it until they're older.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh yeah, like that, she really did have an impact on me. Yeah.
Yeah. It takes a little maturity for them to come to that too. That's true. That's true from both sides of the viewpoint. But yeah, that really fueled my later years till today. I'm still thinking about that really felt impacted. And sometimes you do get it right away, and you get the rewards of your investment in those stories and those experiences. But that one just kind of stayed with me.
Yeah, that's super sweet. That is. I always love those stories, and I think that's kind of, a lot of times, like, just as educators, there's so much going against them, and so many challenges, that things like that are like what keep you going. Really, really keep you going. But like you said, it's so hard if you're not seeing it, right then. If you're seeing it 10 years later or whatever, that's really difficult, but memorable. Yeah. So now that you did have like that first difficult year, I did kind of want to talk to you about like some student engagement, because you've had a lot of practice since then. You've worked in a lot of different classrooms and different settings since then. So kind of what strategies do you have now that you kind of like really keep in your back pocket to make those lessons rigorous? Because I will say that's something too that I've always really appreciated about your work and working with kids, is the level of rigor like that you have with them, even at the younger ages. You have I'm trying to remember the other day, there was something, there was a term, and it was basically like someone that has like high expectations, but they're very warm and compassionate about it. They're not like authoritarian. And I can't remember what the term was. It was in some education article. I'll have to find it. But I thought of that. I was like, that's like, Ruth is like that. But what strategies do you kind of use for those lessons to keep them rigorous and keep the students engaged? Because, we have to have a balance with that. We make it too rigorous, it turns them off.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
I don't know if I have a strategy per se. I think that I like what I do. I think that I don't purposely plan for it to be rigorous. I just think I'm serious about art. And I'm never not going to create something that's engaging and rigorous. And I'm not trying to boast. I'm just trying to be honest and transparent. Like if you are in the right place, it's like when you hear somebody talking passionately, speaking passionately about something, you just
Yeah.
excited. It just happens. And I think that happens because I tend to engage at the level that the kids can tell that this is important, this is real, and I think that energy spreads. And I think I usually can tell when I'm in a classroom, like if I'm working on I'm coming into someone's classroom and working in someone else's space. I'm a guest, like a guest teaching artist. If that excitement's not already there, I can usually tell. You know, I can usually tell I'm walking into a space that the students don't feel valued or appreciated or respected, and I have to build that, and that's really challenging. Um, as far as keeping them engaged, I do try to present my lessons at a lot of different levels. So, and you saw this, I do a lot of body movement for the younger kids, not for the older kids, because they're not going to want to move, right? And so for the older kids, I might talk about things that are happening in the world or emotional connections to relationships, things that are at their developmental level interesting to them. And that's what arts integration for me is a lot is connecting to a bigger picture. We're not just doing art, we're not just doing math, we're not just doing science. Like we're looking at the world in a realistic way. And so I try to, I guess that is a little bit of a back pocket thing I have, is that I try to engage students depending on where they are developmentally and making sure that I'm honoring that. And so like the class that you observed, that was a third grade classroom, several third grade classrooms. So I did a lot of movement. I did a lot of, oh, where do you see that thing in the room? And, or, you know, things that make them think more than just, we're drawing this thing, which even though they love art, you know, I might lose a few kids that don't like to draw. If you can imagine, there are kids that don't like to draw.
There are. Yeah.
And they rather do something else.
I think, you know, like how you're just saying, like the rigor kind of comes naturally. And I think that's part of it, is the way that you scaffold things and the way that you do integrate those other subjects kind of lends itself automatically to being more rigorous, because your expectation, and you're very encouraging in that expectation, that the students are not only going to recognize that this is art, but you're also expecting them to also recognize math terms and like geometric terms. And, you know, it's like, nobody was teaching my third grader like geometric and organic stuff. But I think that kind of comes with the rigor, like that rigor kind of comes naturally because you're expecting them to use a lot of prior knowledge and able to combine all of that into one thought. And that's, you know, that's not something they get a lot of anymore because their classes are so segmented. And it's like, you're in math, you're only going to do math, you know, you're reading, you're only going to do reading. And so for them to even be able to like start pulling in like these science concepts and math concepts into what they're doing really is like quite rigorous for them at the elementary level to be able. And I mean, honestly, when I taught high schoolers, rigorous for them as well, to be able to do that. And you kind of talked a little bit about adapting, you know, at different levels, differentiating. But I wondered, you know, kind of thinking about students' different learning styles or backgrounds, because we do have such varied student populations in our schools in Alabama. Kind of what adaptations do you do to help with those different learning styles or backgrounds?
Yeah, so I don't think they're adaptations. I think it's just the way I deliver it. I think that maybe in the arts, it's easy to do this when I present, let's say, a lesson and it's a new technique or a new medium or a new concept or a theme. I'm going to always present a visual example of other artists that are doing this. So we might look at artists from around the world of different representations, not only for who they are as people, but also is for their work. And so it's easy to do that. That's not an adaptation. That's just how I do my lessons. Art history is built in there. I don't teach art history and art or either or. It's just it's a naturally a good sequence to do that, and it helps me. I don't have to. It's just it works. As far as learning styles, like I was saying before, I think it's more about offering options and how the students engage with the lesson, and also how are they, if they're producing or doing a process or a product, how are they allowed to be present, so
Yeah.
like today, for instance, earlier today, I had two students that I knew are very strong in their research and in their drawing, and I presented a project. They went straight into the sketching and the research online. Oh, we could do this, we could do that. And I had one other student that I knew, he wants to move his body. He doesn't want to sit here and draw and sketch. And he immediately jumped to the other part of the project, which I allowed them to do, which was like counting some of the supplies and organizing. So we had an inventory of what supplies we had to work with to fulfill this project. And so he was highly engaged and excited about helping these other two students that were really heavy on the research, and so like just allowing that to happen and for them to feel included and that they're a valuable part of the team versus, oh, I'm not good at that, I have to do what Miss O'Connor said, and them not feeling positive about it. Just kind of being a little flexible that students are going to show up in a different way. And I don't know if this addresses this area or not, but I'm also really comfortable with kids just putting their heads down and not participating a day that they don't feel like it. Like, hey, you don't, it's okay. Like, I don't
Like we
drill
all have
them.
so
Right. And I tell them that, like, if there's a kid, especially if it's not, again, not my classroom, I'm visiting artists in a situation, and one kid will tell on the other kid, like, they're not working. And I'm like, it's okay. Sometimes I don't feel good. It's okay for them to put their head down. And then I make the announcement that, at any point, if someone doesn't feel, like you have to be engaged today, you can put your head down. And 9 out of 10 times, a lot of kids will put the heads down. They're like, oh, I don't have to do this. And like within like 5 minutes, not even, they'll pop their heads back up and get engaged, because it's just like they're trying it out, or they're like, oh, is she serious? Or I can get away with this thing, but then I don't make it a big deal. And it's just like, oh, I can be engaged. I can do this thing. I get to do this thing. And so the pressure is off.
it becomes their choice. It becomes like the student's choice rather than, and we all do things better when we feel like it's our choice.
Yeah, 100%. And they're little people. I mean, I try to talk to them like little people, not babies, or I don't baby my students. I expect them to be able to communicate in one way or another, whether it be through words or facial expressions or body language, and I trust that. And so I think that's part of different learning styles and just different people.
I've always thought that every other subject in education could learn a lot from arts education, because you think about like when you're in the general education side and you're doing this professional development on like ways to incorporate social emotional learning, ways to like provide student choice, ways to like universal, you think about like project-based learning or universal design for learning and all of that. I'm like, you're just talking about the artistic process. That's all you're doing. I mean, this is what artists do all the time. And I think, like you're saying right now, you're like, well, this is kind of what I naturally do. Because as an artist, it is what you naturally do in your own studio practice. But, for like general educators, it's like, oh, like that's like breaking the rules and like not, not doing it the way that we were trained to do it in our education degree, or, not following the curriculum and the standards correctly. And then, but yeah, I think a lot of the, especially, in the last decade or so, a lot of the professional development for general education has really started to mimic like what artists have been doing the whole time. Like Like, you could have just asked one of
Nailed
them.
it. Yeah, you nailed it. We can all go home now. This is it. It's over. Like, that's the most important thing we can communicate today, is that the arts just it gets it. It does all of those things. Yeah.
Yeah. It really does.
Absolutely.
Well, thinking about you were talking a little bit about a classroom project that you were doing, and I saw a really incredible program last week that you have designed and done. What are just one classroom project, that has really, really excited you that you want to talk about, or maybe even like surprised you with how excited students were engaged? Do you have one in mind that you can think of?
Yeah, probably a few, and some that I had high hopes for that were total bombs. There's that too, which is fine. But I'm the most excited, and you know this, Ashley, because I talk about this program a lot. The Art in Cursive program that I've been doing for a few years and developed maybe in 2018, maybe, and have had the privilege and the chance to do it at several schools, and really every year I fine tune it and make it even better, in my opinion. But I think what surprised me about that program is that I saw a natural correlation between drawing and writing, specifically cursive writing, but just writing in general.
Yeah.
And it's well documented. It's not something I discovered. This is not some epiphany that I had that I'm a genius about. No, like, this is well documented. This is studied in the arts. It's a pretty common concept. And so I developed this program that walks second and third graders, or maybe even earlier, through this connection of like, oh, we're just drawing when we are writing. It's circles and straight lines and connections, and we're just building these dexterity and these tools, right? And so the impact that made, though, the surprise part of it is that when I developed it, I just thought it was going to be this fun program. But what happened to the first year is that teachers were so excited about the program because they reported that students were scared of learning to write. They said we had tears in the classroom. We had children just refusing to do these workbooks that were given and that the teachers were trying to implement, because it's
not like second, third grade.
Yeah, right. This is second and third grade, where it's law. It's Alabama law that students need to be taught cursive writing, and in third grade they have to be tested, and the teachers have to check this box. This is the law.
Yeah.
I can't remember the year, but I'm not sure about other states. I don't think all states have it required, but second and third grade teachers are struggling to implement this because there's a lot of fear involved. And so when that first year I did that program, the teachers were like, the kids are not scared. Like, they're really excited about doing art with you. And it's like a sneaky program. Like, I don't tell them I'm teaching them cursive. I'm just their art teacher. But eventually, by the end of the school year, we're doing only cursive writing, and they kind of come to it in a discovery phase, like, oh, we're writing in cursive. That looks like a C. That looks like an E, but we were twirling, right? And so it becomes such a fun experience, and it removes their fear and their apprehension, that I got even more excited about that program. So now it's like, it's just, I don't even have to sell that program. Like, if anybody finds out about it, like, wow, that's great. And people make the connection right away. Like, oh yeah, writing, drawing, of course, that makes sense. And so it's a really easy sell. It's a really easy thing to convince people that this is going to work. And the students, the students always get excited about it. So yeah, I would say that's my project, my favorite program. That
I would imagine kind of helps them in general with a lot of their fine motor skills too. I mean, beyond the cursive writing, because I just think of my own children and how much they're on, when they were in younger grades, how much they're on tablets, and now how much they're on Chromebooks, and they have horrendous handwriting, but they hardly write in school.
Yes.
So I mean, it's a huge I mean, as a parent, like, I worry about that. I mean, not just can you sign your name, but just even that dexterity and their fine motor skills. Like, that's that's concerning. And I mean, my oldest is a teenager now, so I'm thinking like even younger kids now that are on them even more than he was. Like that's worrying.
Yeah, I remember years, maybe 10 years ago, I had a college student call when I had a public studio, find my number, call me and say, hey, I'm at the university and my professor told me that she was in medical school. And her professor said, our professor has told us that we have to sign up for some kind of art outside of school to get involved in some kind of craft because they are having difficulties. And I might say this the wrong way, but there's a phase where the surgeons are not coming to their profession prepared enough with enough practice with their hands. And so in med school, the professor was saying, everybody's got to enroll in some kind of craft. I don't care what it is. You can paint, you can sew, you can ceramics, you can do crafting. Like, it doesn't matter, but you need to use your hands and you need to prove that you're signed up for this class. And so she was reaching out to me to see if I would host like an art class for all her and her friends, trying to make this credit for this class. And like, that was way before I did the art and cursive program, but I always remember that situation because I think it's not affecting just, oh, can you write cursive? It's what are we doing with our hands? You know, are we playing sports? Are we cooking? You know, like whatever it is that we're needing that fine dexterity with our hands, like the arts are there to help strengthen that.
Yeah. And when you kind of you talked about like the arts and cursive, you talked about how you integrated, and I've seen you integrate math and science into the subjects as well. And that is your focus a lot in when you're talking, not necessarily in your studio practice, but when you're talking about art education is, connecting those two, or connecting arts with non-art subjects. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit too, why that's important to you. Because sometimes there is a little bit of a, there are people that are very strongly like arts for art's sake, and no integration. And we need arts because just for itself. And then there are some people that want it to support other subjects. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that and kind of how you see that, like,
I think that's a tough one because I see myself and identify myself being on both sides. Actually, I do believe in art for art's sake, and in my own art practice, it is arts for art's sake. But in the classroom setting and serving our communities and in the public school systems, you don't always get to do arts for art's sakes, right? We all know that that's where if funding's going to get cut, guess what? It's going to be the arts. And so sometimes I do recognize that arts integration is more of a Band-Aid on a really deep wound. And so it still works. It serves a function, but maybe sometimes you don't need that Band-Aid. You need, some major surgery, some looking at that wound. But at its core and at its highest strength, arts integration is really powerful. And the reason why I feel it makes a lot of sense is because I feel that's how our world is built. I don't think you get out of high school and walk through the streets and see only physics and see only math and see only subjects, right? We're leaving it up to our children to make the connections, and we're not going to help them with that. We're just going to have them go to these individual classes and study only one thing. And I know there's different trains of education, and I'm not talking about all of them obviously, but I work mostly in public schools, some private schools and some art centers, but mostly public schools because there's a need for that. There's a need for students to understand that our world is not just one or the other thing. Like, you have to use all of your skills, all of your knowledge, and intertwine them when you're out in the world. And so I think arts integration makes it a little bit more concrete for them to be like, oh, I can understand the science through the arts, and the arts, I can explore it through the science, and it's interwoven. It's not a sectioned off thing like period 1, period 2, and period 3. And I think you saw some of that last week. I was talking about shapes And automatically the kids were telling me mathematical terms that they were learning. And I was like, yeah, look at that. We're using math terms in art. How interesting, right? I'll do that more and more throughout my year with them. And it'll start to be automatic for them to understand that it's not just Miss O'Connor is here to teach art. Like there is a bigger picture. And so that's why really I love working within arts integration, is because of that realist approach to how we move in the world.
I mean, I think it's how our brains work.
That's
anyway,
right.
You know, like our brains don't work like the education system wants them to work. But you know, I guess I'm thinking a lot about this because I'm doing that presentation next week about kind of like that science of you know, what the arts are to our brain and how we learn with them. But too, historically, I mean, artists rarely were just artists. They were scientists and inventors and philosophers. And I mean, they always, you know, we think about those really, like, if you ask someone that doesn't have a really in-depth arts education, you know, just kind of the average person walking down the street, you know, who do you know that's an artist? They're going to say like Da Vinci, right? They're going to think like Mona Lisa, and think about all of the other things that he did and connected to his art, and so many of the other ones did. And I think, you know, for a really long time, our education, like, they were side by side until, you know, the Industrial Revolution, and it all just kind of got really segmented. But for more of human history than not, they've been connected. And I think something that you do really well is that when people think of arts integration, they think of it as arts supporting another subject, like arts supporting math or arts supporting English. But I think, and, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I've seen in like a true arts integration is that the two support each other. So you're learning art standards through math just as much as you're learning math standards through art. So they're really seen as like an equal footing. But I don't think that's always the picture that's portrayed of arts integration.
Yeah, and I think it can be challenging for people trying to practice it that don't have a lot of experience in it. And, you know, rightfully so, that makes sense. But yeah, it's more like I've heard the analogy, I can't remember where, more like a smoothie. So it's not like a fruit salad where we have this fruit and this fruit and this fruit, we can divide it. It's more like you put it in a blender and it's a smoothie, and you can't separate the apple from the cantaloupe. Like it's together. You can't separate it. They really support each other, like you said.
That transfer of learning is not just that like straight line of, you know, how they want it to be. Like, I'm going to teach you this and your output of learning is going to be this. Like, really, education is much more cyclical. And I think, you know, it goes back to that process of arts that is what that supports. I did want to ask you too, because you did bring that up about, you know, that can be difficult to incorporate that, especially if you are a non-arts subject teacher or you haven't really taught arts integration. What advice kind of would you give teachers that want to do that, but they don't really know how, or they don't know where to start? What would be a good kind of easy way for them to look into that?
Yeah, so when I work with, and I do sometimes train non-arts educators to take a dip into arts integration, I always try to connect with the educator first, you know, so like, which is the arts that you feel most comfortable in? I'm a visual artist, so guess what? That's what I'm gonna do. But, you know, someone, you know, a second grade teacher might really have connected with band when she was in school, or happens to be a poet, or, you know, so first is identifying which of the arts do you feel most comfortable in, whether or not you identify strongly with it, which is the one you're most comfortable in. Like, I am least comfortable with moving my body and drama, but you know, I could do it a little bit, right? But, you know, somebody else might be different. So that would be the first thing, is identify which arts is the most comfortable for you to incorporate in your classroom. And then second is, you could depending on your resources and your comfort level too, you could invite a visiting artist into your room or reach out to your administration and find organizations like Amp Arts that can help you and connect you with someone that could come into your classroom to model some strategies. I think sometimes, we learn really well by just watching or reading online, depending on what kind of learner you are as an educator too. You can also look at a few websites that give you, if you like to read and you learn best that way. Like I used to use Alex. Is it alex.org or alex.edu?
Yeah, the Alabama State Department.
Yeah. That gives you all the standards. Like you can just look at the art standards for the classes that you teach. Like if you're a fifth grade teacher, look at the art standards for the fifth grade and you might be like, oh, I can do that. I can do this. And then work from there on ideas that you can do. Sometimes we think of the art first of like, oh, I want to do a craft. And then it becomes hard to integrate because it becomes more about product.
Yeah.
And you're not really hitting standards. You're not really at the core, giving good value of education, right? And so if you look at it from a standards point, it might be easier for you to connect your standards in whatever non-art subjects to the arts. You could also, I really like going to conferences, and the summers are usually a good way to do that. So if you can find the funding through your administration or your principal or your school district, or couple up with someone that, if you want to go with someone that, there's conferences that that will give you a really nice introduction. I've done the Focus 5 groups they used to do for the Kennedy Center in the Arts Integration over the summers. I don't think they're doing that anymore, but I know Focus 5 is still doing it independently. And I just went to theirs in the summer. And they're a really great introduction to what arts integration can look like with some solid strategies. Like you can walk out and the next day go into the classroom and try something out. You don't have to invent it. That's a lot. Like just try somebody else's lesson out. I think that's a good way to get started without it being overwhelming.
And the State Arts Council actually, for Alabama educators, they don't have to be art teachers. They can be teaching artists. They can be non-art subject teachers or arts teachers. They do a grant for professional development that's up to $20,000 a year. And all you have to do is pay for your meals. So they can pay, even if you're an English teacher or a math teacher that wants to go, they have those resources that you can do as well to help take care of some of that cost, because a lot of that's can be prohibitive sometimes. I did want to kind of change directions a little bit because we did spend a lot of time talking about the classroom, but you also are very heavy in your community, which I think, you kind of talked about how important that is, that it lends towards they kind of help each other, right? Like your community practice and studio practice, and then also the arts education side. But we talk at Amp Up Arts so much about K through 12 arts education. We don't get to talk about as much like what happens when they leave the classroom and they still want to continue that work. So I did want to talk a little bit about kind of what you do in the community with them. So in Tuscaloosa, you do have an annual event that you support with underrepresented artists. I wanted to kind of ask you to just give a little information about that, because I think it's a really cool show. The whole thing I think is really cool how you'll do that, and kind of how that started, what's it achieved. Just some details.
So my involvement in the community it goes in and out of intensity. So when I first moved to Tuscaloosa, which was 15, oh my goodness, about 15 years ago, I had maybe like a year after, I had a public facing studio that was open to the public, and I would host like our First Friday events and open up, and I ran a homeschooling curriculum as well for students that didn't have art classes, and I taught at a private school. So since 15 years ago, a lot of that has changed depending on just what my life looks like and also the community needs. And so something that has trailed through that is the 8x8 show, which is an art event that I host every December, usually the first Friday of each December. And it invites local artists to participate, and it's 100% profits from the sales of the show go to the artists. So it's a nonprofit event, and I host it. It's all volunteer work that, we pull people that help manage and run the show, and everything from front to back is about how can we support the artists that are in our communities. It's this year we're going to have our 10th year, so we're going to have a big bang and make it a little extra special. But it's, I feel really great about it that, I started it 10 years ago just as like, oh, I have this space, let me just invite people that I know to show some art. And then it got some traction. And the second year we grew it, we specified a few more things. And because it's a small town and I had a lot of feedback with, hey, Ruth, we should think about this. Hey, Ruth, why don't we do this? I was very open to listening to the needs of the community. I think that that's why there was a lot of success with not only with the educational work that I did, but with those community projects. And that's just one of the projects that I do, but it's the longest standing one that I've kept for 10 years. I do a lot of projects where I write grants, and we do public artworks around the town. We just finished 3 last month. But that one's a little bit hit or miss with me, like I'll do that just every once in a while. I don't do that every year. It's a lot bigger of a commitment of time and resources for me. And so it just depends on what the needs are in the community and what my capabilities are at the time. But yeah, community work is very important for me. And I think it hasn't always been, but it has been in Tuscaloosa. Before I lived in Tuscaloosa, I was living in Chicago, and community work was not even on my radar. Like I didn't even know my neighbors, there wasn't, I didn't have that connection. And so community work wasn't important to me because it didn't make sense. Right. Yeah. And so being in Tuscaloosa and it being a small town, it just opened me up to that opportunity of listening to people that were, they were telling me, Ruth, you have these skills and we have these needs. Like, can you do this? And just stepping up to that invitation. I was lucky to have that because I've enjoyed it, and I feel I'm well placed to do that. And so I think it's a win-win.
Do you kind of see it, that engagement with the community, as part of being an arts educator too? Because part of it is supporting the community, but also an educator.
Yeah. So first, it helps me in the sense that when the student finds out that I'm actually an artist and that I do things in the community, it's almost like I get some bonus points, right? They're like, oh, you do that, you do this, or they hear, oh, Miss O'Connor. Yeah. So it's like, it gives me a little validity, right? And they need that. Sometimes I don't know if they would trust me if I didn't have some of that. I don't know. I feel like it helps there. But also I think that a lot of the community work that I do is also educational. And this was, somebody pointed this out to me a few years ago, where I involved the Chamber of Commerce here in West Alabama into my 8x8 show. And I invited them to talk about the business side of being an artist. And so we had a panel, and we had a few talks for my participating artists in the show. And the lady who was helping me coordinate, she says, this is really kind of an educational thing that you're doing here. And I was like, oh yeah, I guess so. That makes sense. I'm an educator. And so a lot of the 8x8 show and a lot of the, like even the mural project, it was a teaching mural project. It was centered around education, and it was connecting students in the classroom and what is their idea of beauty, and then having a professional local artist interpret those sketches and create an actual art mural in our community. And it was a public event that everybody came out and painted together. And so even the community event was an educational experience. It was an educational experience for the participating mural artists because they had to come to the classroom. And it was an educational experience for the students. And so, like, I just feel like it's back to what we were talking about earlier. It's just something that is what I believe in. It's something I'm passionate about. And so it just naturally will be included in all of those things. And I think
it's a lot of way to advocate, really.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great advocacy, kind of unintentionally, but it's, yeah. I mean, it's really good advocacy for why the students need it when the community can see that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think they really feed each other and they really help support each other. They really, one helps the other for my own experience and for the people involved, for the community and for the students to see that. And I do it as much as possible. I think it was about 5 years ago also, for Black History Month, I invited, I was working in a school that was majority Black and Brown students, and I invited only Black and Brown artists to come and present about their art. And the kids were blown away. First of all, that there's real artists in their community. Like, what? Artists are just in like books and the internet. Like, what? These are people in art that live here, like around the corner. And then too, that it represented, people that looked like them. Like, oh, I could be an artist, or I could create art, even if I'm not going to be an artist, which is not what I push with my students. It's something that I could engage with in a very deep level. And so representing our community in a classroom is also really essential. And as a minority myself, I'm Hispanic. I think it's also very important for other students of Hispanic culture to also see me in a position where I'm in the community and I am a teacher and a leader. And, it's empowering for them to see themselves see themselves through me in that way too. And I've had high school students particularly tell me that they feel it's very impressive and that it's encouraging for them to see other Hispanics in positions where they usually wouldn't see them. So
I think it's good for even students that are not minority populations, just for them to see too, like, these are the other incredible things that you may not have, known about or learned about. It's kind of good all around. Yeah. So you seem to have really, over the years kind of found like your groove for like what you want to do in the community, what you want to do in arts education, like what your passion is. So I did want to ask you too, like pre-service educators, beginning teaching artists that may want to get more into art education. So much, I think, of what is unique about arts education versus kind of general is really being able to find a unique voice as an educator. So what advice would you have to kind of newer educators in terms of finding and using their own voice as an arts educator?
So that's an interesting question, because that question also comes up for artists, right? So artists feel this pressure, like, what's going to be my style? What's going to be my voice?
Yeah.
And to be honest, Ashley, I've not heard that question in the education sector, which is interesting that you asked that. And maybe I'll answer it the way I answer it with the voice for the artists, which I think would apply for the educators seeking a voice, is that, and maybe it was Picasso that did the quote, but something about creativity, it doesn't show up. Creativity shows up when you're working. It's like you have to be involved in the craft. You have to be involved in the profession. You have to be involved in the thing you're doing. Like, the voice comes out of that experience. The voice doesn't come from you sitting and thinking about it, right? Like, oh, what kind of artist am I going to be? What kind of educator am I going to be? Maybe for some, but I've seen it more often than not come up in the middle of the work.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I've seen educators trying something and saying, that doesn't feel right. That I don't feel comfortable with that. I don't like that. I'm going to do it this way instead. But it's through the action that you find your voice and you find your groove and you find what that is. And so, you know, for me, it would, the advice, I guess, would be just to keep going, that, you know, that'll come naturally. That's something that you'll pick up along the way, you know. And I'm a very different educator than I was my first year of teaching. And that just came through experience and through, you know, canceling some things that didn't work and picking up some new tricks and, you know, just kind of.
I think having patience in it too. I remember I had my mentor when I was getting my admin degree. We were talking about that, and I was like, my first 3 years of teaching, I was like a completely different teacher every year, because I was trying to figure out, like, how permissive am I? How authoritarian am I? How, you know, what is my classroom going to look like? And she's like, yeah, the first 3 years are trash. Like, just, you know, like, they don't count. Like, they don't count, because you're really you're still experimenting. Even if you went the traditional degree route, like I did and you did, you're still very much experimenting those first 3 years. I think, having the patience in that too, and like not expecting to be perfect like the first year. Was a huge thing. I agree. So I did just want to ask kind of one more question too, because we're getting towards the end of our time. We've had a lot of changes. Our state has had a lot of changes in education lately, not just in arts, but just education in general. There's a lot of stuff going on everywhere. So kind of looking ahead, with your experience in the classroom, with your experience in the arts and the community, and being in other places as well, in Chicago and Miami, what gives you hope about the future of arts education here in Alabama?
Yeah, so I don't know if this is specific to my experience, but I do feel that there's a big sense of community across the state, and I've not experienced that in any other state, where there's a drive to lean on each other and there's a drive to support each other, and there's some honesty in acknowledging that we're falling short in a lot of things and that we need to fix things. There are things that need attention. And so I've been lucky enough to be part of some of those honest conversations and realization of how we are falling short, and we do need to step it up, and we need to do that by working together. And so, not to sound like I'm like trying to sell, right, Amp Arts, but you know, it's part of that. It's part of that voice of saying, how can we be a support to every student, every teacher, every community across the state, and how can we help bridge some of those gaps, you know? And so, you know, the work that you're doing, Ashley, in trying to create those paths, because there are resources, there are strengths. We do have tons of talent and tons of people to fill those gaps. And there is a lot of need, but I think that sense of community is what, for me, brings me a lot of hope for the future of education and the arts in Alabama.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I mean, I think even outside of, we have so many partners that are not arts, you know, strictly arts, that are in education. And I think I've seen that even with them too, is they're, you know, everyone's kind of realizing that, like you said, just in the general education world, that we're only going to do this better if we do it together. Yeah, that's been refreshing to see. And it's nice to have the help and the partnership, for sure. For sure. Well, I wanted to thank you so much today, Ruth, for kind of sharing your story and some of your strategies, and for sure your passion. I mean, if anyone watching this doesn't learn anything, like a specific strategy that they want to use, I hope they're at least inspired by the passion that you have, because that definitely shines through 100%. And before we close, I just wanted to do a couple of reminders that the session is being recorded, and we're uploading it to our YouTube channel. So you can revisit it or share it with colleagues who couldn't join live. And our next Amplifying the Arts webinar is going to be at the end of October. And it's actually going to also talk about some work in Tuscaloosa, some partnerships that the collaborative site, the West Alabama Arts Education Collaborative site, has with some of the elementary schools, and one of their yearly events, the Spectra Fest. So they're going to be talking about that partnership next year, which is also such a cool. Are you going to be participating in it, Ruth?
Yeah, I do Spectra Fest every year. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I think that's the first time we met. I think was at a Spectra Fest.
I think you're right.
The first time we met. Yeah.
Yes.
So we're going to be talking to Principal Johnson, and then Sandy Wolf over at the Arts Council about that partnership. So we're really looking forward to that. So we'd love to see everyone there at the next webinar. And Ruth, thank you again. And thanks to all of you for being part of the conversation. And we will see everyone next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.